A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. Now, in the first episode of this mini-series, Aber Nakuda began his discussion by speaking of the Bengalis and Gujaratis, East Indians, who arrived here in Barbados in the early 1900s. They came, they saw, and they swiftly and quietly assimilated into the Barbadian society, providing invaluable services to our communities. But what about the language barrier? Did one even exist? What language did they speak?
Yeah, Bengali speak Bengali and the Gujarati speak the Gujarati language. And so there are many of us with the Bengalis, then what they did to when they came to Barbados too, and with the Gujaratis too to a lesser extent, that they, because they were only earning a small sum of money, they could not afford to bring their wives to Barbados. So most of the Bengalis married to Barbadian women, all right? But what they did is that the Bengalis continued to practice their faith because they were Muslims. But their wives, they never converted or asked their wives to accept their religion, which is Islam. The wives continued to remain Christian, and they continued to practice their Christianity. Even their children, the Bengali wives' children, Bengalis' children, they also follow their mother's religion and continue to be practicing Christians. Gujaratis also married many Barbadian women because, again, constraint of finance, you could not bring your wife here because you didn't have enough money, you were not earning, and so they also married to Barbadian women. But most of them converted their wives to Islam. Because you see, Bengalis didn't have as much knowledge as we say earlier about Islam, and they came earlier too, so they probably didn't want to rock the boat, so they want to let the status quo remain as it is. While the Gujaratis, decided that yes, so many of the Barbadian women then accepted Islam. Some of them just remained Christians because in Islam, a Muslim can marry women of the Judaic faith or of Christian faith, and she could remain and continue to practice her faith. So the Bengalis would then work maybe 6 days a week, and then on Friday, and they would, have a place where they would have their prayer, and they would sit down and talk about their villages and so on. And all of them would have come with a suitcase, a metal suitcase. So in that metal suitcase, the Bengalis and the Gujaratis, they probably would have their belonging. So they would probably have their Holy Quran, their holy book. They would have maybe a mat. They probably would have some other basic Islamic literature and so on. And so that is a no-no for the Bajan family to go into, because they don't want the Quran to be touched if you are not pure. You have to wash, and there's a certain requirements in order for you when you are reading the Quran and so on. But so they would have their stuff in there, and then every Friday they would take out there and they would go at somebody's home where they would have the congregational prayer and so on. The Barbadian women would practice their faith, Christian, they would practice their faith, right? The only thing that was forbidden in the home is that you could not have pork and you could not have alcohol in the house. So those two were no. But otherwise, they go to church and they practice their various festivals and so on. While the East Indian Muslim male, he would practice his own. So no East Indian Muslim male ever converted to Christianity. But there were some Barbadian women who married to the East Indian, they converted to Islam. But especially the Gujaratis, most of the Bengali children and wives remain Christians. So you have the Bengali speaking the Bengali. So among them, they will speak Bengalis, right? But of course, because their wives were Barbadian, most of them in Barbados, then they didn't really teach their wives any of their language. with the Gujaratis, and none of them called their wives to Barbados. So none of the Bengalis called their wives to Barbados. Again, constraint that has to do with finances. The Muslims, the Gujarati Muslims, later on, when they settled down, although some of them married to Barbadian women and so on, some of them then did call their wives to Barbados, and then they also encouraged their children to speak their language. It's a provincial language called Gujarati, right? So those who come from the province of Gujarat speak Gujarati. Those come from the province of Bengal speak Bengali. So Bengal, they came from West Bengal. Prior to 1947, the independence of India, there was Bengal. And then there was a partition with Pakistan and India. So part of Bengal then went as East Bengal, which is now known as Bangladesh. And then the other part is West Bengal. That is where these East Indians came to Barbados from that particular village, different villages, and a district called Hooghly district. And then the third set of East Indians who came to Barbados were called the Sindhis. So they came around 1932. So East Indian Gujarati Muslims, they came around in 1929. Those who came with the schooner, remember, with the coconuts and so on, they came in 1929 to Barbados. The third group of people, the Sindhis, they would have come from the Karachi or Hyderabad, Sindh, because prior to the partition, that was all part of India. And so the first person to come was Jivatram Thani, and he came to Barbados, and he came again by accident. So the first group came by accident, the second one by accident, the third person also came by accident. So Jivatram apparently had set off to assist his brother-in-law in Bermuda, because his brother-in-law had a business, and his brother-in-law wanted to go to India for a while, and asked Jivatram to come to Bermuda to hold on at the store until he returned from India. So Jivatram says, no problem. So he held on, worked, and then when his brother-in-law came back from India, Jivatram said, well, look, I have about $500 and I would like to open a business somewhere. And his brother-in-law just said, well, why don't you try Barbados? And so here Jivatram with $500 came to Barbados and then started the first Thani store on McGregor Street. So that again he started to call. He got sick after a few years, and then he went back home. But he asked his brothers to come to Barbados. So we have Thani stores in Thani shoe shop and all of them. They are all Thanis are families, and so that is how the Thani family and that is how the Thani, the Sindhi community then started to migrate to Barbados. But most of them, you will notice, unlike the Bengalis and the Gujaratis, Muslims, right, who are itinerant traders, they started to have stores and shops. And what they used to do too, there were very few of them would also go in the country like the Muslims and do the itinerant trading. But they would also have a layaway plan, so that when someone cannot pay right away, they would hold the goods until they could pay off. It is different from the credit system that the itinerant traders were given. The itinerant trader was given the item right away. I was going every week to collect the money. But this one, he was just holding it, So that is how the third set of East Indians came to Barbados around 1932. Then when Barbados, we had our independence. We had the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in the 60s, and we needed some doctors. And as you know, Dr. Cadell was the Minister of Health at that time. And he'd also studied in India too. So he knew many of those students who would have studied with him. And so he then got many of the East Indian doctors to come to Barbados to work in our QEH hospital when we first opened up, right? So that's why you see the migration of the South Indian, and most of them came from southern side of India.
I was in the government service in Madras, and after 3 years, they transfer you. So with 4 boys, it was very difficult. I was by then separated from my husband, so, and the pay wasn't very much in the government service for assistance. So I would have to put them in boarding schools, which would be very expensive. And so that is why because I knew cattle and I applied here and got this job, that's why I left to come here to work. And now that my sons are all settled in Barbados, we stayed on. That's all. Wasn't like, when you say migration, you normally think of some bad government or some unhappiness at home, but there wasn't anything like that.
Today, we still have many East Indians who are doctors in a hospital, but now they are Bajan Indians. Understand? Our boys and our girls are still playing their part. They are still helping, they are still taking care of people at the QEH and in the clinics, and they have private offices and so on. So that includes the Thani, the Sindhi, the South Indians, the Muslims, all of them. So you see, East Indians in Barbados are playing their part in different ways, right? At different stages of the development of Barbados, and they are helping developing Barbados, like each and every one of us. And so not only in trade, you will find now that East Indians are in small businesses, they are in car parts, and they're now even into groceries. And if you notice that when they go into any type of business, the prices of the items usually come down. So it becomes very competitive. And you will notice that. Same thing with the groceries now that they are going into. They are into hotels now. So they are into small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and they are into large businesses, into restaurants and other stuff like that. We are now even into processing in processing plant and so on. Because remember, halal. There was a great need for halal chicken. Halal is that's something that is slaughtered according to the Islamic way, and so we had to buy chicken, and then we had to halal it or kill it ourselves. So that way you do is the way you cut 3 veins, and that is considered as halal then, and you pray the name of your God that I do this in the name of God, So we never had that place where we could go and purchase halal chicken. So if I wanted halal chicken, then I would have had to, and that used to happen, and even to a lesser extent. My customer have chicken, raised chicken, so I will buy chicken from her, and I will kill them myself and pick them myself. Even now they go around getting sheep from their customers, and then they would bring it and they would kill it themselves. They halal it. But now we have a processing plant now for the last few years. So where you have halal chicken that is available at all the supermarkets. And halal is also not because that is required by the Islamic law, Islamic Sharia, but it is also very healthy, because when you halal a chicken, you are draining out all the blood, and so that it is healthier. It's healthier for you to eat. And so you will find that a lot of people are gravitating towards eating halal chicken. So we have processing plants, and recently we have also someone who have started raising animals and so on, grass-fed animals like cows, and now he is doing some burgers and so on just by KFC in Black Rock. And so they are also going into that type of stuff. Of course, East India was also one of the first ones that went into scuba diving and so on. There's somebody, it was called Paki shop, dive shop that used to be by where Cuz is. by Hilton Hotel. And he was the first one who used to carry out, we are talking about in the 1950s, right? He used to carry out tourists, right? So he was one of the first one who would have started dive dive shop dive in, taking tourists out to dive and just go and that type of stuff. So East Indians have been not only doing that too. There were many of them at that time while they were still doing itinerant trading, and we are talking about the 50s and the 60s, that they also used to have taxis, but they would let the Barbadians drive the taxis, right? In fact, some of them also became partners with Barbadians, local Barbadians. I remember my dad was a partner with a baker, so my dad was a partner in a bakery. And so there were there were some, I remember that they were partners with those fishermen, that they were trying finance the boat, and then they would work out the profit, right? So not only were they doing the itinerant trading, but they were also partnering with Barbadians, the local Barbadians, into other ventures. Most of the time, it didn't really work out. We're not going into why it didn't work out. Today we have our children, because they are educated, they are born in Barbados. You'll find we have lawyers among us, we have doctors and teachers, and we have people who are performing all different type of services in Barbados. So we are playing our role in different aspects of the Barbadian life. So we are also part and parcel of this nation building. We are also part of Barbadian folklore, Barbadian culture. So like in the early 30s, you will find Barbadian children were singing and dancing, and they were and singing about the itinerant trading, the Kuliman House of Fire, the Kuliman Runaway, and then you had the Steel Donkey, you had the Ali Singh, remember you had thing in Della Belly, and there are so many other culture aspect of the East Indian folklore that is weaved into Barbadian culture. So we are not only has to do with finance and business and commerce, and not bartering, but also has to do with culture, folklore. So we are part and we are embedded, ingrained into the Barbadian way of life. Our children, and most of them, are born and bred Bajan. Born, their name was string buried right here. So I would say over 80% of the East Indian community in Barbados were born and bred Bajan. Like me, I came from India when I was 10 years old. And I am here for the last 66 years. So I will be 76 next week. So I went to school at Wesley Hall. So I may not born here, but my attitude and behavior is still like Bajan. So I can consider myself as a Muslim first, but a Bajan Indian. And so most of my children and my grandchildren, they know a lot of Barbadian culture, they know Barbadian way of life. They know about eating macaroni pie and chicken. They're more into that than eating East Indian food. So now in many, many East Indian homes, you will find, for example, when we have our guests come in, or when we even have us, getting together, we have fish cakes, and then we also have samosas. Because remember, samosa has been a dish that each and every Barbadian, there's no party or birthday or something like that. There's no party or birthday without having a samosa. So that has become a part of the East Indian cultural gift to the Barbadian community. You find samosas everywhere. So we have samosas, and we would also have fish cake along with it. The earlier East Indians who would have come here, they would have probably concentrated more on eating the food that they would have eaten at home. So they, and especially the Bengalis, for example, even today too, and they are mostly, they mostly eat dal and rice and dal, and they would have fish, and they would have their own and then they would eat vegetables and so on, but then the Barbadians children then started to eat the Barbadian food, so they would have then had part of that too, but mostly they would continue to eat their East Indian food. When the Gujarati came, of course they also continue to eat the East Indian food. Again, dal and rice is the staple food of all the East Indians, whether you come from East or whether you come from West. And then they would also have something called curry khichdi. It's a special dish with yogurt and yellow rice, and that is also very special for the Gujarati people. And then another one is called biryani. Biryani is like a pilau. You have chicken biryani you could have, and that is mostly eaten by the Muslims, not by the Hindus, because they don't eat meat. I think some of them don't. And then they will have their roti, but we don't eat roti like how you will find wrap roti, like how we are accustomed to eating from one of the outlets in Barbados and so on, because that is really a Trinidadian indentured East Indian invention. Because when they were going in the cane field, remember they had to prepare their food. So the indentured laborer then came up with this wrap roti that you are accustomed, if you are eating now. But for us, we dip and eat. So we would have roti by itself, and we would have a curry by itself. We would have, whether it's a vegetable, whether it is chicken curry or mutton, and we would dip and eat. Dip and eat. So, and then we would also have, of course, the other dishes, snacks would be like samosas. We would have then different type of mithai, which you call sweets. So you would have those type of stuff. The Sindhis would have then their own. Again, dal and rice is always the staple stuff. Then you could have, now we also eat salt bread and curry. We are now into, today my wife is cooking chow mein and something else. We had soups so what we do now, that we have the best of the both worlds. So now we are also into eating cuckoo. We are eating flying fish cutters and and so on. So now we have added more cuisine to our own itinerary and our eating habits. So the younger generation of Barbadians are more into the Barbadian type of food, but they also eat the East Indian type of food too. So it is both. So what it has done is that kind of complemented the whole flavor and the habits and so on. So that is what really happening now in Barbados. And during our festival time, during wedding time, of course you would have both the East Indian food, and you would also have the Barbadian food too, because now you have people with variety of taste. The taste varies now. The younger generation want a macaroni pie and so on. The older one probably want biryani or something. So, and Barbadians also are now tasting the variety of food, the different type of food that is being cooked in Barbados by the East Indian community of Barbados. And especially now that we are also, just like our Barbados tourism are trying to vow as many visitors to Barbados, we are also doing the same thing too as East Indians, as Muslims in Barbados too. So when we have our guests come in by us from England or whatever it is, we give them not only samosa, but we put fish cake too, because it's an acquired taste for them. So let them know that, look, there is another dish, that is a dish that we also eat along with us. And so those are the kind of things we are doing. Recently, our government established relationship with Ghana, the government of Ghana, and so on. And so we as Muslims in Barbados have also established a relationship with the Muslim community of Ghana, because we also want to play our part. How can we also get them to come to Barbados? How can we create a better understanding among the Muslims of Ghana vis-a-vis the Muslims of Barbados? So indirectly, we are also doing that. And actually, we are now also working on halal tourism. Halal tourism will be those Muslims who want to come and who want to have a special treatment. You know, they would want, let's say, where they can go and pray 5 times, and they know they would be able to get halal food, you know, and then they would be able to go sightseeing, and they would be able to see where the East Indians first came, a history of the East Indians, history of the Muslims. At the same time, don't forget, although we are speaking about the East Indian and we are talking about Muslims, the first Muslim that came to Barbados was not an East Indian, you know, right? During the slavery, right? Among the slaves that were brought from Africa, there were many, many Muslims, up to 15 to 20% of Muslim slaves who were brought to the Caribbean, including Barbados. So we would have a record to show that at Codrington Plantation, we had Muslim slaves, and that we had Muslim slaves all over the CARICOM, including Haiti and Guyana and Trinidad and so on. And so when we have halal tourism in Barbados, we will go and take them to the Newton burial ground, for example. We will take them to the mosque to show. So there will be a different type of halal tourism. We're still showing them Bashuba. We still carry them to Farley Hill. You understand? But then there are other aspects of it, right, that we would include. So we are also playing our part in nation building, you know, in playing our part to make Barbados a better place, because we are here to stay, you know, and our children are here to stay. So we want to play our part.
Wonderful. This fascinating blend of 2 cultures coming together has created a unique fusion that is now an integral part of Barbados's celebrated cultural landscape. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This mini-series continues next week at the same time. In the meantime, be good to yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors.